All right, folks, we are just a little over a month away from the NFL draft, and NFL free agency starts tomorrow, and there are already big moves happening all across the league. And I want to take the next couple days and talk about every NFL team and their biggest need heading into the offseason. So I'm going to start with the AFC tonight, and I'm going to start with the defending AFC champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, and they really have two positions that they've got to desperately fill. First, let's look at wide receiver. With the allegations that came out over the weekend, it is very possible, I don't want to speculate, but it's possible that Xavier Worthy and Rashid Rice both face suspensions this season. And they've had a lot of legal trouble, and Travis Kelce looks older every day. He's definitely not what he once was. That would leave him basically with Juju Smith-Schuster and Hollywood Brown. So their best wide receiver would be an older guy who the worst team in the NFL cut. It is possible if those two players are suspended, they will have the worst wide receiver core in the NFL heading into next year. So they desperately need help at the wide receiver position. But if their biggest need right now is left tackle, they drafted a left tackle last year's draft. It didn't work out. He got benched partway into the season, moved their guard over, so they desperately need a left tackle, and I think that's their biggest need. For the Bills, Buffalo Bills, I'm going to go with secondary. They need help all over the secondary. I thought their cornerbacks got eaten up versus the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Damar Hamlin is a good player, but I don't think he's in the top half of the safeties in the league. They could really use a lot of secondary help. On the Baltimore Ravens, I went with pass rusher. I think they're pretty solid on offense. They've got good weapons. They've got a good quarterback, obviously. Their offensive line is pretty solid, but they do have a lot of gaps on defense, and the fastest way to cure that is with an elite pass rusher, so that is probably their biggest need. For Texans, I think the Houston Texans right now are just a player or two away from really contending for a Super Bowl. I like their weapons. They've picked up some more wide receivers here, Christian Kirk and some others in the offseason. I think their defense, they got two outstanding pass rushers, but they really need help on the offensive line. And if they're going to take the next step, they've really got to get help on the offensive line. I believe they gave up 7 sacks versus the loss and the loss versus the Chiefs, and I think they're a couple of great offensive line players away from winning that game and really contending for a Super Bowl. For the Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers, I have wide receiver down. Ladd McConkey was one of the best rookies last year, but they need more than him. They got Quentin Johnson, who's super inconsistent. I think they got a good defense. I like their offensive line with Joe Alt. They got a good coach. Justin Herbert obviously is very good, but I think they need another playmaker. And another dominant wide receiver would really round out this team. For Broncos, I thought they were pretty solid all across the board. I put on their wide receiver because I think Courtland Sutton is a good player, but they could use another wide receiver opposite of him, and then I think they'll be looking at a pretty good team. For the Steelers, this one's pretty obvious. They need a quarterback. And they need a quarterback probably as desperately as anyone in the NFL. It's been kind of a rotating door with Russell Wilson. They've had Russell Wilson. And then, I'm sorry, I lost track of what I was saying there. But they just picked up DK Metcalf. So they got DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and then a very good defense. If they can just find the right quarterback, I think this is a team that is going to contend to win the AFC North next year. For the Bengals obviously have two great wide receivers. They have a very good quarterback, very solid offense in general. But this team needs help all over the defensive side of the ball. And if they trade Trey Hendrickson, their defense is going to be even worse next year. I think this is a team that is in desperate need of an elite pass rusher because, again, I think that's the fastest way to shore up a very poor defense. The Dolphins, offensive line. They got the 2 wide receivers. I think they got some good pass rushers. They're pretty solid everywhere. But right now on offensive line, it's obvious that Tua is very fragile and you really got to protect him. He's not a very mobile person. Takes a lot of sacks. He's been injured multiple times. So I think the Dolphins could really use offensive line help. For the Colts, I went quarterback. I think Anthony Richardson, I've seen enough for him to believe that I don't think he's going to be a long-term starter in the NFL. He's too inconsistent. His completion percentage is too low. He misses too many easy passes. I think the Colts have actually a pretty decent roster. I like their offensive line, solid on defense. But right now, they need to find a quarterback. And whether that's Sam Darnold or someone through the draft, I don't know. But they really need to find a quarterback. For the Browns, I went quarterback as well. They locked up Myles Garrett long-term in the offseason. They have a pretty good defense. Their offensive line is solid. They don't have a lot of weapons right now, but they really need a quarterback. Deshaun Watson, coming off another really bad injury. I don't know if he's going to play at all this season. Obviously, he's not the best person in the locker room or for your franchise. This is a person that needs a team that needs a long-term solution at quarterback. For the Jets, I went quarterback as well. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be in the building. I like Garrett Wilson. I like their defense. Their offensive line has gotten a little bit better. But again, they need to find a long-term quarterback, a position that they have been looking for a very long time. For the Jaguars, I wrote down everything. This is a team that just needs a talented person somewhere. They got Trevor Lawrence, who looks like he's digressed over the past 2 seasons, but their offensive line's not very good. Their wide receivers are outside of Brian Thomas are pretty shaky, considering they just gave up their second best wide receiver and their best tight end. They need a lot of help everywhere, but they really need another weapon. So I'm going to go wide receiver here. I love Brian Thomas. I thought he was the best rookie wide receiver last year. I think he's going to have a monster year this year, but they need someone opposite him. For the Raiders, I went wide receiver. They just picked up Geno Smith here over the past week, so I think they're going to be set on quarterback here for at least the next 2 to 3 years. They have a great tight end in Brock Bowers. They have a great pass rusher, but right now their best wide receiver is Jacoby Myers, and he's basically a 2 or a 3 on most other teams. They're another team that could really use another wide receiver to help Geno Smith out. For the Patriots, I went wide receiver as well. I loved what Drake May did last year. I think he's super talented, but right now he has no one to throw the ball to. And then finally for Titans, I went everything. This team is so void of talent right now. I think they could be the worst team again in the NFL. They have to find basically somewhere everywhere, but right now the biggest need is probably quarterback because they don't have that long-term solution. So that's my biggest need for every AFC team. We'll go through the NFC tomorrow, and we'll talk to you later.